that's higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, and that higher than Seder Ishtalshlus of Midbar, that Layashav Adam Sham, that's beyond the level of Adam, is the source that is enabling to be able to eradicate and to take care of the Midbar that's Lamata Seder Ishtalshlus. That is the level of the Asher Yashav Adam Sham, because it's a place of klippos and Nachash Sarav Akrav, etc., etc. And that is the idea of why we need to have the level of Iskafia also, because to be able to defeat the Deshtus of Klippa, you can only do it with a level that's higher than Tam Vadas, the level of Shtus to Kedusha. And that also has to do with the Gilui of the level of that's higher even than Adam, the level of Ma'oid, that it's that through the level of Ma'oid, working in a way of action, Ma'asim al Tzedakah, the mem of Ma'oid goes on Maisa instead of basing it on Machshava and Dibur. Through that we reach to the level of Ma'oid that's Bligvul, and that's also the same idea of Nasa before Nishma, because we're doing the action before the level of the thoughts, which is again the idea of Iskafia. So we're holding in Ois Dalid, line 13 on page Ches. The two manners that's explained previously concerning the wilderness. Midbar the negative type of wilderness. That's below the settlement of a person, meaning it has to do with Shalosh Psat Meis. Umidbar Mal Yusa, and the level of Midbar, that's the advantage level of Midbar. Shalomayla Miyishuv Adam, that's beyond the level of where Adam is settled. These correspond to the two psukim that it says in Shir HaShirim. There's two psukim that says, who is this that arises from the wilderness, that we spoke about before at the beginning of the Maimer, that we brought a medrash that Iluya min ha-midbar, its ascent comes from the midbar. And not only does its ascent come from the midbar, but even more so, it is an ascent that's even higher than midbar. Up till now we spoke about how midbar is very high, so we can explain how there's a level even higher than midbar as well. But in Olam and Midbar there's actually two psukim. Kosov Rishon, the first pasuk in Shir HaShirim, says, Mizos Olam and Midbar. Who is this rising up from the wilderness? Kesimros Ashan, like pillars of smoke. Mekuteres, that is scented, Moirul Avoina, the different types of spices that were used in the Keteres of the Moirul Avoina, Mekol Afkas Roichel, from all the perfumes of someone that sells these spices. That's one pasuk. Later on, a few prakim later, it says in Shir HaShirim, because Vasheni, it says in a second pasuk, Mizos Olam and Midbar Misrapakes Al Doida, who is the one that is rising up from the wilderness, that cleaves and joins with its beloved, Tachas Atapoch Hirar Ticha, below the apple tree, beneath the apple tree, I have awakened you. Shama Chiblascha Yimecha, over there your mother has had the labor pains. Shama Chibla Yiladesacha, over there she had the one who birthed you had her pains of birth also. And the difference between these two psukim, the first pasuk of Mizos Olam and Midbar, and the second one, move it al Piyam Mavur B'Chassidus, is explained according to what's it's understood according to what's explained in Chassidus. The Gam al Piyam Targum, it's also understood when you look in the Targum on these psukim, that because Varishon Mizos al Mifarish Mizos Olam and Midbar, then the first pasuk, the Targum explains who is this that's Olam and Midbar. So it says, Kad Saliku Yisrael min Madbara, when Yidden arose out of the wilderness, La'achre Yitzios Mitzrayim, when they went out of Mitzrayim. So the first pasuk is talking about when the Yidden were in the wilderness on the way to Eretz Yisrael. And then Bakos Vashein Mefarish, and the second pasuk, the Targum explains, Mizais Olam min Midbar. Who is this rising up from the wilderness? Amar Shloime Neviyaya, Shloime Navi, who was the one who authored Shiashirim, is saying this, Kad Yechun Messiah, for the time when the dead will be given life. In other words, by Tchias HaMesim. So the second pasuk is talking about Mashiach's times, and the first pasuk is talking about Yitzias Mitzrayim. This means the Kivin Shakosov Chayzer V'Omer Eilapam Mizais Olam min Midbar, since the pasuk repeats again and says, who is this that's going up from the wilderness? How you moving? It's understood. That this is something additional to what it says in the previous pasuk. Therefore, we cannot say it's talking about the same thing, but rather he explains that that this pasuk is referring to the time of the future. That's why he has to preface that Shlomo, the prophet, says this. In other words, the other pasuk, Shlomo Melech could say it as an ordinary person or as a chacham, that he's using flowery terms to describe what happened when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, when they went into the wilderness. But the future, that only a Navi says. So that's why in the second time around, where it explains that's talking about the future, so on that he says, Shloime Neviyaya said it, that Shloime HaNavi said it. Because he's referring to Bisman Bias HaMashiach, he's referring to the time of the coming of Mashiach, and not just any time during Bias HaMashiach, Ubezeh Gufim, Bisman Tchias HaMesim, and this itself in the time of the resurrection. Sh'oz Yamdu Kol Misai Yisrael B'meshach Kol HaDoros, that then all the dead of the Jewish people throughout all the generations will arise. V'yeh Ribui Gadol, there'll be a great amount, a great multitude, Ribui Rivavon, tens of thousands times tens of thousands. Kiyoima de Salkom in Madbar the Yisrael, top of page test, like the day that the Yidden went out from the wilderness to the Eretz Yisrael. Shezel Mashu Mesayim Shama Chiblas Chayimecha Shama Chibla Yolada Sacham. Now, why does it conclude over there with the pasuk? Over there is where your mother had her labor pains. Now, there is where your birth, the one who gave birth to you, had her labor pains. This indicates on the idea of multitude, meaning that birth has to do with multiplying, and therefore by using the words it's coming to tell you about the great amount of people that will arise. What it says, that under the apple tree I have awakened you. It's referring to the giving of the Torah. The Chazal say that it has to do with the apple tree, the mountain being held over them, or even deeper, it has to do with a type of tree, which actually Tosfos explains is not actually an apple tree, but we know also an esrig, Tosfos says, is referred to as a tapuach, and the esrig over there, the fruit precedes the leaves. Usually, leaves precede the fruit, and on that Tosfos asks, if the leaves precede the fruit, how do we say that's an apple? That here it's talking about an apple tree, that the fruit precedes the tree. That's, the Gemara says, that's like Nasa saying before Nishma, and but the Tosfos ask, we see that an apple tree is not that way, and he brings proofs from other psukim that tapuach could go on the esrig, and since the esrig is in its tree an entire year, so therefore it's not talking about that's how it has, it's the fruit is there without it preceding the leaves, etc., even after the leaves fall off. But like it's understood from the well-known Tosfos in the Sugim Matan Torah that deals about it in Masechet Shabbos. But the main point is that we have these two periods of when the Yidden were in the Midbar, when going out of Mitzrayim, and the period of Tchias HaMeisim on the way with Mashiach. So the Rebbe is going to explain these two psukim in Avodah. Line 7. The explanation of these two psukim in Avodah is the first pasuk. It says, who is the one rising up from the wilderness like columns of smoke? It's known how does smoke occur when fire consumes something, and the part of what the process is that some of the things, the water in the item, the other materials in the item go up in smoke. When the fire is separated from any matter that it's consuming, there's no smoke. Only when fire joins with something that opposes it, and it's fighting with it to consume it, so then the smoke occurs. According to the material and the physicality of the matter, the smoke increases. So therefore, we see that the smoke is a byproduct or a result of the fire trying to absorb something else and trying to consume something else. Move on from this understood the idea of smoke in Avodas Hashem. It indicates on the idea of refining the material of something, the courses of something, and the physicality of something. Based on this idea of what the purpose of smoke is, or what the idea of smoke in Avodas Hashem is, will be understood what it says in Matan Torah, V'har Sinai Oshan Kulot, that the entire Har Sinai was smoking. This is obviously not some side thing. This is a main part of the giving of the Torah. Because of that, Hashem found it necessary to make this wonder that Har Sinai was smoking, and not just some smoke came off of it. Part of it was enveloped in smoke. It's rather the entire mountain was smoking. Though seemingly it's not possible that the mountain should be entirely smoking. Like the Mefarshim ask, and it's brought down in Chassidus, that seemingly rocks don't burn and they don't smoke, for sure not. So what was this idea that Hashem made a miracle out of the ordinary to make it smoke? Obviously, this was done with an intention, because there's a certain message and a certain idea that Hashem was transmitting to us, with this idea that the whole mountain was smoking. So he's saying, but rather this was something supernatural. Because the need in having smoke during a primary thing in the giving of the Torah. That the giving of the Torah is also something, and the events that took place by the giving of the Torah is also a lesson for all generations. Like all matters that took place by the giving of the Torah, that there are lessons and directives for all time. Again, especially since this was something supernatural, so for sure this was a lesson in Avodah. Lefi, how come? What is the message over here? It indicates refining the physical, because that's the idea of smoke, the refining of the physical in such a way that it rises up in columns in a higher and higher level. Top of page Yud. And the pasuk continues. After saying, who's this rising up from the wilderness, like columns of smoke. So it continues further in another aspect, another teaching. That it has it's scented and spiced with the moir and lavoina from all the perfumes, all the spices of a spice peddler. Chassidus explains the detailed aspects of those things that I'm just not going to go into it. It's not relevant to the Maimer here. So that is what the first pasuk is about. Mamshu b'kos v'asheni. In the second pasuk continues, Mizois oilam midbar. Who is this going up from the wilderness? Misrapek is v'goymer, that's cleaving, etc. The koyals manat chilak and niskolel mat targum. It's referring to the time of Tchias HaMesim, like we mentioned before from the Targum Onkelos. Vinyan b'avodas adam, and the idea behind this in the service of a person. Gam bezmanazeh, also in these days. What does that have to do with these days? If we're saying that it has to do with Mashiach's time, so why does it have to do with us? Al pi hayidu, according to what's known, shekol hagilindel us, all the revelations of the future times. Gamma in the Tchias HaMesim, also the matter of the resurrection of the dead. Tluyin masein, or the same calls my meshchagolus, dependent upon our actions and service for the entire duration of the exile. So therefore, it matters for us the lessons of Mashiach's times, because how will that occur in Mashiach's times? Only through what we're doing now. Yes, we could say, according to what it says in the Gemara, even the most minor amongst you are the ones that enliven the dead, that give life to the dead. So Chassidus explains what is the idea of the enlivening of the dead, that even the most minor amongst you, because in truth, our avoida is to give vitality to the dead. And he's going to explain that concept right away. This is what through a person's avoida megalus on itzel kisha b'davar agashmi, he reveals the godly spark that's in the physical matter. And through revealing the godly spark that's in the physical matter, so now the physical item that up till now was dead, like we're soon going to explain why, now he gives it life. So therefore, every single one of you is the one that revives the dead, because the physical object is dead, and by revealing the godliness in it, you're reviving it from the dead. The physical matter itself is a level of death. Like it's explained in Amor on the Pasuk, see, I placed before you what is life and what is good, and what is death and what is bad, etc. And Hashem tells us, and you should choose life. The L'chura in a movement, seemingly it's not understood. The Miza Pesich Le'yivcher B'chaim. Who's a fool that's not going to choose life? Why does the Torah have to tell us choose life? But rather, life and death that he's referring to is something in a more subtle manner of life and death. The intention is every physical item that we come in contact with, there is the physicality of it and the spirituality of it. The life and the goodness of any physical item is the spiritual component of it, and the life force and vitality that it gets from Hashem, the godly spark that's in the food, for example. And the physical, tangible item on its own, that's death and that's bad. Concerning this, it says, you shall choose the life. Don't choose the physicality, the dead part of that piece of steak, but choose the godly spark that's in that piece of steak. The person should choose the life and the soul of the matter, that matter is cleaving in Hashem, the one that gives life to the living. Outside of godliness, there is nothing else that is the level of life. Even though the Medrash says that there's 10 things that are called Chaim, Yidden are called Atman Veik Mashem Chaim Chaim Torah is called Chaim, Hashem is called Chaim, And the Gan Eden, it goes through 10 different things. So what are you telling me, that only Hashem is Chaim? The reason why we call a Yid Chaim is because because you are cleaving to Hashem. So really, the Chaim is Hashem's Chaim, and the only reason why I'm called a Chai is because of my cleaving to Hashem. And the same thing, Torah is called Torah's Chaim because of that reason, and all the other things that the Medrash enumerates over there. And Mechaya Chaim, the one who gives life to the living. Therefore, when I'm looking at any physical item, therefore the spirituality of any matter, the godly spark, the Dvar Havai that's in any matter, is that's cleaving to godliness. That's the level of life, of being alive. That's the idea of the resurrection of the dead in Avodas Hashem, that every single one of you resurrects the dead, meaning it's our job to reveal the godly life force that's found in everything and gives life and brings that item into being. Like it says, that always the words of Hashem are set in the heavens and in every physical object as well. Through having revealed the life, the godly life force in the physical matter, that on its own is in the way of death. Through that becomes the resurrection of the dead. And through our doing the avoid of Tchias HaMeisim in our own lives by resurrecting the dead of the physical objects, we affect there should be the resurrection of the dead in the literal sense when Mashiach comes. So all of this we've been talking about up till now, this is all still midbar lo yashiv adam sham, beyond the level of the koiches pnimim. He says, midbar. All of this is the level of midbar, whether it's the avodah of going out of Mitzrayim, the avodah of that he spoke about, the level of the columns that are going up from the that goes up higher and so on and increases, and that it's the refinement of the physical, and it's about the transforming of the and revealing the godly that's in everything. There's even a level that's higher than midbar in the positive way. Concerning that level, it says Iluya minha midbar. It's the Medrash said that its rising is from the midbar, meaning it rises even higher than the midbar. So he explains the idea behind this is the midbar who eretz lo yizerua. It's a land that's not sown, it's not planted. Eretz shein bazriya tzmicha. It does not have planting, does not have any growth. The similar level on a person is the forehead. That the hairs do not grow on the forehead. That level where there's no growth, that is the level of loy adam hu, that's in the person himself. The level that corresponds to the forehead, which is the wilderness of loy adam, the way it's above, that's the level of arich. Yet after b'chinas arich keser, though the level of arich ampin is in the sphere of keser, harei ze shoyrish an etzolim. Arich is still the root of the emanated beings. And higher than the level of arich, higher than the midbar, is the level of atik shenetak. What's it mean, netak? Atik meloshen netak, that it's uprooted. Gam b'chinas arich, even from the level of arich. This itself, it's not just in keser, but darga l'mayla medarga, level that's higher than the level ad nekudas reishut lo yasyada, till the point of the head that's not known, va'ad that's not able to be known at all, va'ad la'atzmus muhus, until Hashem's very essence. Concerning this level, it says iluya min hamidbar, it rises up from the wilderness. That's a level that's beyond the level of midbar. A level that's beyond the adam, in a much higher way, where because it's the level of atik, etc. So we'll stop over here. We'll continue tomorrow to see how that is in Avodas HaAdam.